Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Before I begin today, a big thank you to Mac78 for the virtual gift voucher. Thank you very much for the support, my friend. I really appreciate it. Thank you. But on to today. So Angron week is finally here. With the channel hitting the big 60k subs, as always, every 10k subscribers, we get a Primarch week special. And to be honest, I enjoyed our dive into Perturabo so much during Iron Warriors week that I thought it would be great to do the same this week with Angron. Quite possibly the most overlooked and stereotyped Primarch of them all. But this week, I hope to shine a light onto this tragic Primarch. And where better place to begin than with his upbringing as a slave, and a look at the Primarch he was always supposed to be. Spoiler warning to begin, the events we are discussing today are from the Horus Heresy Primarch novel Angron, Slave of Nuceria by Ian St. Martin. As always, I really recommend you read the novel for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. Not only that, we help to support the great Games Workshop and Black Library, because without them, we don't have this amazing lore to talk about. I will put a link in the description as always. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, when the Primarchs were stolen from Terra and scattered across time and space by the warp, it was upon the world of Nuceria that Angron landed, having to fight for survival from the very beginning, as Eldar attempted to destroy the would-be Primarch, having foreseen the blood that would be spilled by his hand. But despite being a young boy, unaware of his surroundings or who he even is, Angron survived the assault and slew his attackers. But the commotion of the fight had drawn the local humans to the scene, and before Angron can even draw breath, his body is riddled with needles and smothered by a net, tranquilizers pouring into his system, turning his limbs to lead and his mind to darkness. And this is Angron's introduction to life. From the first moment, fighting for survival, fighting against other people's opinions, against the role that had been cast. Sure, the Eldar have visions of the future, but as we've seen before, the future is never set. It does raise the question as well, if the Eldar had not acted in trying to kill Angron before he could grow, would he have been captured by the slavers? Because they were brought to find the Primarch by the sound of the commotion. Could Angron have grown alone in the wilderness like the lion? Like Russ? How different things may have turned out had events played out just a little differently. The slavers certainly wouldn't have been able to subdue an even adolescent Primarch as easily, let alone a fully grown Angron. It's an interesting question to ponder. Unfortunately for Angron, and the Imperium as a whole, he was taken by the slavers though, and the next thing the boy Primarch knew was awakening in a pit, surrounded by 100 other people. Instinctively he knows these are his people. Though clothed in rags, shackled and chained, worn and beaten down by their harsh existence, he knows these beings are different to the strange Xenos who threatened his life. A huge pyramid dominates the centre of the pit, and a roar of the crowd fills the air. The pit is an arena, a theatre of death, and for the oblivious, confused boy Primarch, the game has just begun, as acid begins to cover the floor, turning the pyramid into an island of survival. At first the slaves help each other, pulling each other onto the safety of the pyramid above the boiling acid. But as the liquid continues to rise, the safety of the pyramid becomes smaller and smaller, and the first of them falls into the acid. And as horrific as this is, we get our first real insight into the Primarch Angron was intended to be. The pain-induced screams of the victim cause pain to Angron, and it's with this first death that the most basic instinct of all human behaviours kicks in: the fight for survival. The crowd begins to turn on one another, fighting for the safety of the higher ground. The boy struggles against the heaving mass of frenzied slaves around him. He is easily stronger than any of them despite his size, and even several of them working in concert fail to pull him towards the edge. The urge to lash out and send them falling into the mire builds inside him. The choice to fight feels right, deep in the marrow of his bones, and he knows instinctively how best to imbalance, disable, and overcome every one of the other slaves. It would be so easy, but he fights it. Every time one of the slaves hits the water, it hurts him. He doesn't understand how or why. As more and more are killed, it merges into a lightning storm behind his eyes, amplified by the grasping, clawing hands and gnashing teeth tearing at his skin. He fights against the environment that has ensnared him, and not his fellow man, using only enough force to keep his footing without throwing those attacking him off. He fights not to kill, but only to survive. The genetic makeup of Angron here, the Primarch he is, resisting the urge to fight the panic-crazed people around him. Despite them trying to throw him from the pyramid, he resists. He feels the pain of their deaths. Of course, he doesn't understand it yet, but he was made to save the people of humanity, not to kill them. And as we have begun to see, and will more so moving forward, Angron may well have been intended to be a much different Primarch than the one that Emperor finally found. But as the acid continued to rise, until the one remaining peak at the top was left, Angron was forced to fight away his attackers for his own survival, instinctively killing them in the quickest and pain-free manner that he could as they tried to force him from the platform. While he knew he needed to survive, he took no pleasure in having to remove the lives of those around him, until eventually only he remains. And this was the beginning of the only life Angron would ever know, chained from one game to the next, a gladiator of entertainment from the start. Though of course the boy was still a Primarch, he was still no match for the technology that kept him imprisoned. And as he grew within the arenas, so too did the security to keep him in check. But there was a light for Angron, however small and dim it may be, the first and only real human contact he ever had, in conversing with his fellow slaves, one of which in particular, named Oenomus, became the closest thing to a mentor the young Primarch would ever have. And I guess the interesting debate to have here is this upbringing worse than that of, say, Lionel Johnson's upon the world of Caliban? Angron is forced from fight to fight, torture to torture, so to speak, at least for his spirit. But in between these moments, he is at least party to some form of goodness within humanity. However small and brief this may be, he is shown there is another way. Whereas the lion, he had nothing, no one. He grew alone amongst the forests of Caliban, fighting the beasts of the world for nothing but survival, until eventually he was found by Luther. But he was much further grown than Angron. The same could be said for Russ, who found kinship with the wolves of Fenris before any other. It's an interesting point to consider. But we receive more glimpses of the horrors Angron had to endure. the friends he was forced to lose within the games of the arena, and his first encounter of a psyker who was forced to burn his companions alive, and thus sowing the seed of hatred for psykers Angron would always harbour. Each of these deaths weighs heavily on Angron. He doesn't know why, but he feels he has to save them, as if it's in the very marrow of his nature. But as he laments his failure to save his friend in the last encounter to Oenomus, a whimper from a nearby boy draws his attention, a new arrival to the pits, and suffering after his first test. Angron rises, stepping over the forms of sleeping slaves as he makes his way over to Jakura. He looks down at the youth, shivering in a fetal huddle, his brow glittering with his nightmare's panic sweat. "Leave him be," says Oenomus, appearing at Angron's side. He will have to grow accustomed to the torment, if he wishes to keep company among the living. Sinking slowly to his knees, Angron places a hand on Jakura's shoulder, the movement quieter and softer than one would think possible for a man of his size. He closes his eyes, and Tethys feels the boy's pain as though it is his own. Heat, knifing blades, screams and the splash of hot blood in his eyes. Angron winces for a moment, and the boy goes still, his cries silenced as they are replaced by deep, dreamless sleep. Oenomus stares at Angron as the gladiator pulls his hand away. "What?" The old man looks between the becalmed Jakura and Angron. "What did you do?" "I don't know." Angron shakes his head. "What is the first thing you remember, Angron? The very first thing?" "Cold," Angron replies. "The mountain?" Angron frowns. "No. Different from the mountain. There was an unnatural cold. Metal, not stone. There were voices, then light. Then..." He grips his head. "I can't remember." "You aren't meant for this place," says Oenomus. "Wherever you came from, whatever it is you are destined for, you will not find it within these walls. And one day, these caves and these chains will not be able to hold us, and you will be free to find your destiny." "My destiny is beside you, Oenomus," says Angron, "with my brothers and sisters, living free of the hot dust." The grizzled fighter smiles. "Then free of the hot dust we shall be." Other slaves have witnessed what Angron did for Jakura. They shuffle forth towards him, fear and suspicion mixing with a kind of reverence, a desire to be similarly blessed. Angron sees something strange in their eyes, something that he has never seen before. Hope. They sleep in a great unbroken chain that night, each laying a hand on the other, ending with Angron. Tethys feels lifetimes of abuse and torment rack his father, as he takes the pain of his brothers and sisters into himself. Tethys can feel the will of his young father harden into steel, staring up at his masters above, weeping tears of blood. He knows that a reckoning is coming, that soon he will leave this cave and tear the High Riders down from their gilded thrones, that he will give his brothers and sisters their liberty, even if he has to spill an ocean of blood to do so. Tonight, he gives them all that he has the power to give. If only for a short time, he grants them a reprieve from the torture that consumes their lives. Morning will come and bring the hot dust. But until then, Angron suffers so that he might give his family some measure of peace. Man, what a passage that is. Now, Tethys, in case you're wondering, is a World Eater librarian who is viewing his Primarch's memories, just to avoid any confusion. But I'll be honest, I never expected to see something so touching, so poignant, in an Angron novel. We've been so conditioned by this rage-fueled monster stereotype that seeing this man, this caring and compassionate Primarch, is really quite emotional, extremely touching and bittersweet. As many Primarchs, if not all of them, they have some form of psychic ability, even if it's just a natural warding against the powers of the warp. And here so too does Angron, appearing to have the ability to draw out people's pain, taking it into himself. The role the Emperor would have had planned for Angron must have been vastly different to the Primarch he eventually reunites with. Angron almost appears to be some form of healer. How different could he have been had he been raised upon the world of, say, Macragge rather than Guilliman? But instead, crafted by the world of Nuceria into a gladiator warrior. But the important thing to note here is that it has not yet defined him. Amongst the depths of the cages and cells, Angron has found compassion. He has found, dare I say it, love and family. Would the Emperor have arrived now? Still, I believe Angron's life and future could have been saved. But it was not meant to be. In refusing to take the life of his mentor Oenomus for the enjoyment of the crowd, Angron's punishment is the butcher's nails. And after recovering from the blinding coma-induced state of rage the nails induced upon his mind, it is revealed to him that he had been sat upon his mentor Oenomus, and in his blind rage had torn him limb from limb. And there's a truly haunting passage when Angron overhears this news from talking guards. The howl that rips from Angron's lips shakes the walls. It is so loud that it rouses the entire arena guard to scramble, fearing a slave rebellion. He screams, even after his throat tears and blood bursts from his lips. It continues on for 3 days. A scream of such sadness and pain, nothing like it has ever been heard before or since. Now, as we know, Angron would go on to finally lead a revolt against his captors and burn the city to the ground. But it certainly asks the question here, did all of Angron ever truly recover from this moment? Did all of the compassionate, selfless, caring Primarch we saw before, absorbing the pain of all of his family to give them one good night's sleep, truly survive this? Or had the nails killed a part of him that would never recover? While Angron may not have been defined by his experiences within the arena before, it's hard to say that this event didn't. But as always guys, what do you think? Who do you think the Primarch Angron was intended to be? Which of his brothers could he have fostered a relationship with? And did Angron truly have the worst of the Primarch upbringings? Or in finding those moments of light amid the darkness, show him that humanity resided within him? As always guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I hope some of you have been a little surprised at the depths of character Angron can possess, and we'll see how further his life is shaped as we continue this week. But as always guys, a huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support really means a lot to me, it truly does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. If you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.